So how did you join Harriet?
I suppose that Casey saw my work somewhere on a stage and decided that I would be appropriate for the job.
Mhm.
I was called in to interview, and I was ready uh, to expand career-wise.
Mhm.
You
So where do you begin with researching Harriet Tubman?
know. Specific to her, I go to the photographs that or the daguerreotypes that exist of
Mhm.
her. Um, Most of the images that, and what I'm familiar with from even high school or junior high, uh, are there. There are maybe four
Right.
that are her when she was older, when she was more mature. There was a newly found photograph that now resides at the Smithsonian that was her actually at the age where we were focusing the story of Harriet. So she was in her 20s.
Mhm.
And a lovely photograph. I mean, it's kind of uh, very elegantly dressed in a way. It's simply but elegantly dressed, and it's a way that you don't normally see Harriet. But that seeing that photograph inspired me to realize her in a deeper way. To give her a broader quality that was more than the kind of modest, matronly view of her that we kind of have to this point carried with us for Harriet Tubman.
Mhm. Well, I know Cassie's talked about presenting her as a superhero in the film, and it's
Mhm.
like you definitely get that vibe when you watch the movie. So, what did you guys discuss in terms of the costuming to convey that?
We're telling the story of Harriet Tubman, but through the lens of a modern eye.
Mhm.
And I think that she wanted for the message of Harriet to play to modern people, modern women, and to put forward you know the extraordinary power that she had in helping to free as many slaves as she did. For a woman of 5'1", it was really out of the box. I mean, and for everything that she had gone through, and to continue to go back to the same plantation or to plantations in that area to help to free so many people was really that of a superhero.
There's a lot of color in the costumes. It's really bright, and we have two costumes downstairs if
Mm-hmm.
anyone wants to take a look after this. But you're working off of these old photographs of her that are
Mm-hmm.
black and white or sepia tones.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you I guess like where do you start like getting your ideas for like the color scheme and the aesthetic for her clothing?
Well, I'm in researching the groups or
Mhm.
characters beyond Harriet. I was looking at other daguerreotypes of the period. I mean, it was the beginning of photographs being used for documentation of life, and there are many photographs of plantations and slaves on plantations and slave owners and uh, people on the streets of Philadelphia and figures that we are very much aware of, like Frederick Douglass and John Brown, and so on and on and on. I could go directly to the original source of what uh, the groups of people look like. Um, and most of those are neutral. I mean, they're all black and white or of a sepia tone. Uh, and then looking at some of the daguerreotypes that had been tinted, I got the idea that that and the way that the color sits on the neutral toned photograph. I decided that in some ways it was reflective of Harriet as a figure in this sea of sepia. I mean that to get her to feel uh, to resonate as this extraordinary human being that her color would be bumped up and sit outside of the world of the sepia tone.
Mm-hmm. She has like I feel like three very distinct, I guess, well, it's part of her fashion evolution, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
but obviously she looks very different when she's a slave than when she's a free woman.
Sure.
And then, like when she's a slave and she's escaping, she has this very tattered, like linen
Mm-hmm.
blue dress.
Mm-hmm.
And then when she's in Philadelphia, she meets Marie and then she wears these really nice, refined dresses. And then when she's on her rescue missions, it's kind of this like badass, like undercover
Right.
in the middle of the night,
Right.
like, just like boots and pants and jacket. So can you talk about designing for those like three very distinct parts in the movie that cover her life?
Her story, it starts on the plantation, and we're all very aware of, or have an idea of what slave clothes are.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that this, the dress that she starts in is a dress that she wears every day for every task that she has to do. All the work that she does on the plantation, as well as going to a religious service. And we see that dress, we follow that dress through her journey, freeing herself, and the farther that she gets away from the plantation, the dress starts to deteriorate off of her body. So that we are at ground zero, and once she makes her way and is introduced to Marie Buchanan, who is a woman played by Janelle Monáe, and she has a boarding house of newly freed slaves and free Black people that are working in Philadelphia. And Harriet is introduced to her by William Still. But when we see Marie, I mean, she comes down the stairs, and she is the first time that Harriet has ever seen a free Black woman that is self-made, and she's radiant, and I think that then becomes the strength and image that Marie kind of follows, as she develops. And under Marie's tutelage, because the dress that she's given when she travels back to the plantation to get her family and some of the other passengers, that green dress is one that I wanted to have reflect her connection to the earth and her connection to nature, and that it still resonates as a strong and works towards as we step towards her power outfit, which is the red dress and red coat. Between those two, between the green dress and the red outfit, we see how she starts to recreate herself. Her first Bandit Look is it's a marriage of both feminine clothing and male clothing that gives her almost a modern swagger. I mean, she's got a broad brim hat that she wears with a headscarf, and a skirt and a coat that it gives her this really great, strong presence. And then she goes through a series of where she becomes a shapeshifter, and we see her as a sailor, a blackjack, which was a black sailor. We see her as a dandy, and we see her as an old woman. And there are a couple of other disguises that she has, all so that she is riding under the radar of the slave catchers and the police force. And each one, partly because it's Cynthia Erivo, the way that it is played. I mean, Cynthia has become this fashion icon, so she's very connected to clothing. But she it's how we see Harriet's style mature, and how her internally she's maturing to the point where she is then able to face her lifetime nemesis in Gideon Brodus, and that's when she's in the red outfit. And then we finish with her as a Union soldier or a Union officer leading these African American troops down the river. So that's.
And I love the use of red throughout too. Can you talk about that and what that you wanted to represent for her?
Sure. I mean, it's so that we, it's a tie, or her their life essence, or it is her power color, and so I have that as an accent all the way through, and then the payoff is her superhero
The red
outfit.
vest. Yeah.
Yeah.
Were they all the costumes custom made? Did you have to rent anything or source?
Definitely not. Well, all of Harriet's were custom,
Okay.
and Janelle Monáe, except for an original or a vintage dress that she wears in the dining room scene. That was a beautiful silk stripe. For Harriet, we had to build most of her clothes because we needed duplicates so that we could show the distress. So her first slave dress, I think there were probably 12 of those. Also, we could, because we were shooting out of sequence as well.
Yeah.
And then the same with the green dresses. I think that we probably had 8 of those. Suits were tailored for Leslie Odom as William Still.
Those are amazing vests.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
And also for Jennifer Healy. I mean, we did her things as well. Built her things.
You've worked in film, theater, and TV. So how do you approach designing for each medium? Like, what are the differences and similarities?
It depends on what the production is. I mean, period clothing has always been a passion of mine. From the very, the first time that I started designing costumes. So understanding detail, understanding period and period silhouette and what it takes to achieve silhouette. I mean, that's always been very present for me and a desire to recreate. In most of for most of my career, as a theater designer, I have been given the opportunity to have more poetic license, where when you're designing for stage and you've got a set that has been abstracted from what an actual space, what a real space might be, it allows for the clothes to follow suit and or not. I mean, you can make a choice there. But because the way that I think and see always tends toward the detail. I mean, I'm focused on the detail from up close, and allow for it to be what it is from a distance as well, knowing that everybody in the theater would miss it if it wasn't there. Right. So that that transition from theater to film or television is pretty direct. I mean, I tend to, or have tended to, design a lot of musicals. So that has a different. It tends for me to have a different quality. But there's also, much of it is because I'm designing so that they function in a specific way. Yeah. So that the clothes move in a specific way, and so that they can get in and out of clothes in as simple a way as possible.
So what are you working on now?
Well, I spent the better part of the summer and into the fall designing West Side Story with Steven Spielberg, which was an amazing delight. I mean, it was really, really fantastic. And just finished the workshop of the new musical about Michael Jackson. So that goes into rehearsal in the summer and in the spring, and then we open in the summer.
Some more musicals for you.
More musicals, yeah, and looking to the next film project, but
Nice.
we'll see. Right now,
Awesome.
it's more stage.